She clutched her worn carry-on, its contents holding a cure that could change the world, her mind already on the pivotal presentation an ocean away. But to the sneering flight attendant, she was just another black woman in economy, an inconvenience, her bag a problem. He mocked her, humiliated her, his racism a casual poison. He had no idea the problem he so arrogantly dismissed was Dr. Evelyn Reed, whose breakthrough was worth billions, and whose quiet dignity concealed the power to bring his entire airline to a very public, very expensive reckoning. His cruelty was about to cost them everything. Esteemed friends and fellow seekers of truth, welcome. Today we journey into a narrative that underscores a stark reality. Prejudice often blinds those who wield it, causing them to underestimate the quiet strength and profound impact of those they seek to diminish. The story you are about to hear is a powerful testament to resilience in the face of blatant discrimination and the far-reaching consequences of a single hateful act. We are deeply honored by your presence. If you are moved by accounts that expose injustice and celebrate the ultimate triumph of integrity, we warmly encourage you to subscribe to our channel and click the notification bell. Our commitment is to share voices that resonate with courage and stories that demand a more just world. Thank you for choosing to spend your time with us. Let us now turn to the events of this remarkable account. Dr. Evelyn Reed, a woman whose intellect shone with the fierce, steady light of a distant star, was, at 42, on the cusp of an achievement that promised to ripple through the annals of medical history. A biochemist of rare brilliance, she was the founder and driving force behind Novogene Therapeutics, a compact, fiercely independent research company. Novogene was not a glittering corporate behemoth. It was a testament to Evelyn's unwavering vision, a lean, agile entity she had painstakingly built from scratch, fueled by an almost alchemical blend of dogged determination, profound scientific insight, and the loyal dedication of a small, hand-picked team of researchers who shared her passion and her relentless work ethic. For well over a decade, they had operated in the relative shadows of the pharmaceutical giants, often subsisting on dwindling research grants, the occasional angel investment, and an unshakable, almost spiritual belief in the profound importance of their mission. Their laboratory was a cramped, often chaotic space, filled with the hum of aging equipment and the scent of chemical reagents, a far cry from the gleaming, state-of-the-art facilities of their competitors. Yet it was within these humble walls that miracles were being meticulously coaxed into existence. And now, after countless 18-hour days, innumerable dead ends, frustrating near misses, and moments of doubt that would have broken lesser spirits, they had finally, unequivocally, achieved it. Novogene had developed a revolutionary gene-editing therapy, a molecular scalpel of breathtaking precision with the scientifically validated potential to not just halt, but to actively reverse the devastating progression of a rare and particularly cruel neurodegenerative disease known as amaranthine syndrome, a condition that insidiously stole memory, mobility, and ultimately life from its victims, often in the prime of their years. The data was groundbreaking, the implications staggering. Evelyn herself was a study in quiet intensity and profound, almost self-effacing humility. Her list of academic accolades and scientific publications was extensive, yet she wore her achievements lightly, like a comfortable, well-worn coat rather than a glittering mantle. She was far more at ease in a slightly stained lab coat, surrounded by the familiar comfort of beakers, centrifuges, and complex genomic sequencers, than she ever was in the harsh, often performative spotlight of public recognition. Her dark, intelligent eyes, typically framed by simple, unpretentious glasses that perpetually seemed to slide down her nose, held a keen, almost unnervingly analytical spark, but they also held a deep well of compassion, an empathy born from years spent witnessing the human cost of the diseases she battled. She was, by nature and by training, an introvert, a deep thinker, a meticulous problem solver, not a charismatic orator or a polished self-promoter. Her personal life mirrored this understated elegance. She lived modestly in a small, book-filled apartment. Her greatest indulgence, a tiny, meticulously tended rooftop container garden where she cultivated rare herbs and surprisingly prolific heirloom tomatoes, a small, fragrant patch of green sanity amidst the relentless concrete and steel of the sprawling city. She was now en route to the prestigious, highly anticipated World Health Innovators Summit in Geneva, Switzerland. This was not just another academic conference. It was the global stage, a gathering of the brightest, most influential minds in medicine, biotechnology, and pharmaceutical investment. It was here, before a select, high-stakes audience of leading international researchers, powerful pharmaceutical executives, venture capitalists, with checkbooks capable of funding small nations, and representatives from major global health organizations, that Dr. Evelyn Reed was scheduled to deliver the keynote presentation, unveiling Novogene's groundbreaking findings on amaranthine syndrome to the world for the very first time. This presentation was far more than just an academic exercise or a bid for scientific recognition. It was the culmination of a decade of relentless, often thankless work. It was the key to securing the massive, multi-year funding and strategic global partnerships necessary to navigate the labyrinthine, astronomically expensive process of FDA approvals, scaled-up manufacturing, and international distribution, the essential steps to bring their life-saving therapy from the rarefied atmosphere of the laboratory bench to the bedsides of the thousands of patients around the globe who desperately, urgently needed it. The fate of millions, the future of her small, dedicated company, and indeed, the trajectory of her own life's work, rested squarely on the success of this single, crucial, 60-minute presentation. The scientific data was irrefutable, the therapeutic mechanism revolutionary, but Evelyn, a pragmatist to her core, knew that in the high-stakes, often cutthroat world of pharmaceutical development, perception, presentation, and the ancillary narrative were almost as critical as the discovery itself. Despite the monumental, almost terrifying importance of her journey, Dr. Evelyn Reed was flying economy class on Global Wings Airlines. This was not a matter of current financial necessity. Novogene, poised on the very brink of its transformative breakthrough, was finally beginning to attract serious, substantial investor attention, and offers of more comfortable travel arrangements had certainly been made. It was, rather, a deeply ingrained matter of principle and long-standing habit. Evelyn had always been rigorously frugal, both in her personal life and in her professional stewardship of Novogene's precious, hard-won resources. She believed, with an almost puritanical conviction, that every available dollar, every carefully allocated resource, should be channeled directly towards the vital research itself, not siphoned off for what she considered unnecessary luxuries or performative displays of status. Her travel budget, like much of Novogene's operational expenditure, was managed with a scrupulous, almost ascetic efficiency. Besides, she confessed to her closest colleagues, she often found a certain productive anonymity in the relative bustle and egalitarianism of the economy cabin, a chance to observe human nature in its myriad forms, to think without interruption, to simply be, without the often stilted and performative social expectations that accompanied the rarefied atmosphere of business or first-class travel. Her primary piece of ruchniya clade, a worn but exceptionally sturdy black leather satchel that had been her constant companion on countless research trips, academic conferences, and grant-seeking expeditions across the globe, was not filled with designer clothes, expensive toiletries, or the latest electronic gadgets. It contained, quite literally, the pulsating heart of her life's work, a specially cushioned high-security laptop holding terabytes of irreplaceable raw genomic data, the meticulously crafted data-rich slides for her Geneva presentation, the product of hundreds of hours of painstaking refinement, and, most preciously and vulnerably, several small cryogenically sealed and temperature-sensitive glass vials containing the highly purified prototype of their revolutionary gene-editing therapeutic agent, irreplaceable, one-of-a-kind samples that were far too sensitive, far too valuable, and far too critical to the upcoming live demonstration portion of her talk to be entrusted to the unpredictable, often brutal vagaries of checked baggage. This unassuming satchel was, in essence, her entire professional world, the hopes of millions condensed into a single, easily overlooked bag. The boarding process for Global Wings Airlines Flight 815 to Geneva, departing from a chaotic, overcrowded gate at a major international hub, was already well underway when Evelyn joined the queue. It was the familiar, organized pandemonium of modern air travel, a confusing ballet of stressed, overtired passengers juggling too much luggage, harried, overworked gate agents attempting to maintain order with strained smiles, and repeated, increasingly impatient announcements, and the ever-present underlying thrum of anxiety and anticipation that always seemed to permeate airport departure lounges. Evelyn, patiently waiting her turn in the long, slowly snaking queue for Zone 4 boarding, clutched her precious satchel protectively against her side. She mentally reviewed, for perhaps the 100th time, the opening lines of her presentation, her mind a complex, focused whirlwind of intricate biochemical pathways, statistical significance levels, and projected patient outcome improvements. When her zone was finally belatedly called, she moved forward with the quiet, purposeful efficiency that characterized all her actions, her gaze already scanning the interior of the aircraft for her assigned seat. As she stepped across the threshold of the plane, she was met not by a welcoming smile or a polite directional gesture, but by the visibly stressed, demonstrably impatient, and radiatingly annoyed figure of Gary Pritchard, a senior flight attendant in his late 40s. Pritchard was a man whose initial youthful enthusiasm for the perceived glamour of his globe-trotting job had, over 2 decades of dealing with demanding passengers, crying babies, and chronic jet lag, long since curdled into a kind of weary, embittered, and deeply ingrained cynicism. He possessed a florid, unhealthy complexion that spoke of too many airport meals and too little sleep, a perpetually condescending smirk that seemed permanently etched onto his thin lips, and a deeply ingrained, almost reflexive, sense of superiority that he seemed to reserve, with particular unthinking venom, for passengers he instantly, almost subconsciously, deemed less important or problematic, a judgment he often made based on a crude, superficial, and deeply prejudiced assessment of their appearance, their perceived social class, their ticket category, or, as Dr. Evelyn Reed was about to discover to her profound cost, the color of their skin. "Economy, ma'am?" "That way," Pritchard barked, his voice sharp and dismissive. Barely glancing at the boarding pass Evelyn politely proffered, he gestured vaguely, impatiently, down the crowded, narrow aisle. "Find your seat quickly, please. We're already behind schedule, and we're trying to get this bird in the air on time, if some people would cooperate." His tone implied that she, by her very existence, was already a source of potential delay. Evelyn, long accustomed to the often impersonal, sometimes brusque nature of modern air travel, and focused primarily on the critical mission ahead, merely nodded politely, refusing to be baited by his rudeness, and proceeded down the aisle, her eyes scanning the overhead bin numbers, her precious satchel held firmly. Her assigned seat, 28A, was a window seat towards the rear of the surprisingly full economy cabin. As she reached her row, she noted, with an immediate sinking feeling of premonition, that the overhead bin directly above her seat was already crammed to bursting with oversized, hard-shelled roller bags, bulky winter jackets, despite the mild autumn weather, and a haphazard collection of duty-free shopping bags, all clearly exceeding the airline's own stated carry-on restrictions. There wasn't an inch of space to spare. She politely asked the passenger already occupying the aisle seat in her row, a young man entirely engrossed in a loud, violent video game on his tablet, his headphones clamped firmly over his ears, if he might possibly be able to slightly adjust his own rather large duffel bag, which was taking up a significant portion of the bin, to make even a sliver of space for her much smaller satchel. He grunted non-committally, without looking up or pausing his game, making absolutely no effort to move his belongings. It was clear no help would be forthcoming from that quarter. With a quiet internal sigh of resignation, Evelyn began to discreetly look for alternative safe storage space in nearby overhead bins, acutely aware of the growing queue of impatient passengers now bottlenecked behind her in the narrow aisle. This was precisely when Gary Pritchard reappeared, his face set in an expression of exaggerated theatrical impatience, his arms crossed, his foot tapping an irritable rhythm on the carpeted floor. "Is there a problem here, ma'am?" he asked, his voice laced with an annoyance that was entirely disproportionate to the minor logistical challenge at hand. He seemed to be actively looking for a confrontation. "Yes, a small one, I'm afraid," Evelyn replied calmly, still trying to keep her own rising frustration in check, keenly aware of the importance of maintaining her composure. "The overhead bin above my assigned seat appears to be completely full. I was just endeavoring to find another suitable spot for my carry-on. It's quite compact, as you can see," she gestured to her satchel, "but it contains highly sensitive scientific equipment and irreplaceable research data that absolutely cannot be checked into the cargo hold." Pritchard cast a deliberately slow, ostentatiously disdainful eye over Evelyn's unassuming black leather satchel. Then his gaze flicked up to Evelyn herself, his eyes lingering for a moment too long on her simple, practical attire, her unadorned face, and her dark skin. His unpleasant smirk deepened, becoming a sneer. "Sensitive scientific equipment, huh?" he said, his voice dripping with a heavy, deliberate sarcasm that was clearly audible to the surrounding passengers. "Looks more like an oversized handbag to me, if you want my honest opinion. And these overhead bins, ma'am, are intended for real luggage, for passengers who know how to travel, not for every little piece of personal junk that people can't be bothered to check. If you people in economy," he paused, letting the derogatory phrase hang in the air, "would just learn to pack properly and check your obviously oversized bags like you're clearly supposed to, instead of trying to cram everything into the cabin, we wouldn't constantly be having these infuriating delays and holding up honest, paying customers." The "you people" was not accidental. It was a deliberate, loaded, and deeply offensive racial and class-based barb, designed to demean and other her. Evelyn felt a hot flush of anger creep up her neck, but she battled it back, her years of academic debate and courtroom experience allowing her to maintain a veneer of composure, though her heart was now hammering against her ribs. "This bag, sir, meets all standard international carry-on size and weight requirements, as I'm sure you could verify if you chose to," she stated, her voice firm but still carefully modulated. "And its contents are, as I have already clearly informed you, extremely valuable, fragile, and essential for my professional responsibilities. I simply require your assistance, or at least your non-interference, in finding a secure and appropriate place for it in an overhead compartment, as is my right as a fare-paying passenger." Pritchard's face contorted in a mask of theatrical outrage, as if she had just uttered a profound personal insult. He was clearly unaccustomed to being challenged, especially with such articulate and legally precise language, by a black woman he had already summarily dismissed as belonging to the problematic economy class. "Offensive, am I now?" he sputtered, his voice rising significantly in volume, deliberately drawing the uncomfortable attention of many nearby passengers, some of whom were now openly staring, their own travel anxieties momentarily forgotten in the face of this unfolding public drama. "I'll tell you what's offensive, lady. It's entitled passengers like you, with your cheap tickets and your ridiculous demands, holding up a multi-million-dollar aircraft and hundreds of other paying customers because you can't be bothered to follow simple airline regulations. Now, either you find a place to stuff that damn bag under the seat in front of you where it belongs, or you can get off my plane right now. We don't have time for this kind of drama and entitlement today." He punctuated his increasingly aggressive tirade by jabbing a finger aggressively towards the limited space beneath the seat in front of hers, a space clearly insufficient for even her compact satchel, let alone safe for its delicate contents. The implication was brutally clear. Her bag, and by extension she herself, was the problem, an unwelcome obstruction. The public nature of his venomous outburst, the sheer, unadulterated, and now openly racist and classist contempt in his voice, stunned Evelyn into a momentary, disbelieving silence. This was no longer just appallingly poor customer service or casual rudeness. This was a blatant, humiliating, and deeply prejudiced abuse of his limited authority, a public shaming designed to assert his dominance and put her in her perceived place. She could feel the curious, pitying, and in some unfortunate cases, even hostile stares of her fellow passengers. The delay he was now single-handedly causing was entirely of his own making, a direct result of his unprofessionalism and bigotry, yet he was projecting the blame squarely and hatefully onto her. "If you are unable or unwilling to assist me in finding a suitable and safe overhead location for my essential carry-on baggage, as is your clearly defined professional duty and responsibility as a member of this airline's cabin crew," Evelyn said, her voice now dangerously quiet, each word carefully enunciated, her eyes like chips of glacial ice. "Then I must formally request that you summon your purser, the chief flight attendant, or indeed, the captain of this aircraft, immediately. Because I assure you, Mr. She paused, her gaze deliberately, pointedly, dropping to his tarnished silver name tag. "Pritchard, this deeply unprofessional and discriminatory incident will not, I repeat, not end here." Her calm, articulate, and unyielding response, her refusal to be cowed or intimidated, seemed to enrage Gary Pritchard further. He clearly saw it not as a reasonable request from a passenger facing a genuine issue, but as a direct, insubordinate challenge to his authority, an unforgivable act of lèse-majesté from someone he had already systematically demeaned and dismissed as inferior. "Oh, you're threatening me now, are you, little lady?" he sneered, stepping so close that she could smell the stale coffee and nicotine on his breath, his physical presence deliberately menacing. "You think you're someone important, someone special with your sensitive equipment and your fancy talk? Let me tell you something, darling. On this aircraft, I am the one who is important. I am in charge, and right now, you are nothing but a disruption, a problem, a major pain in my backside, And if you don't want to become an even bigger problem, one that involves airport security, federal marshals, and you missing this flight altogether and quite possibly spending a night in airport detention, I strongly suggest you do as you're bloody well told. Stuff that ridiculous bag wherever it fits, and shut your mouth. His face was now inches from hers, his eyes burning with a mixture of unadulterated malice and a strange, almost desperate, almost pathetic need to assert his dominance over her. It was at that precise, ugly moment, as Pritchard's hateful tirade reached its apogee, that Dr. Evelyn Reed, with a practiced, almost imperceptible subtlety honed by years of navigating difficult, often hostile, academic and corporate environments where she was frequently the only woman and almost always the only black woman in the room, discreetly activated the audio recording function on her smartphone, which she still held loosely, almost casually, in her right hand by her side. She didn't raise the phone, didn't make any overt gesture that might escalate the immediate physical threat or alert him to her actions, but the tiny, almost invisible microphone on her device was now silently, faithfully, and damningly capturing every venomous word, every contemptuous inflection, every prejudiced slur that spewed from Gary Pritchard's lips. The tense, unbearable standoff continued for another long, excruciating minute. Several passengers were now openly filming the entire ugly incident on their own phones, their murmurs of disapproval and disgust growing louder, more insistent. An elderly gentleman, a distinguished-looking man with a neatly trimmed white beard, tried to intervene, his voice firm but polite. "Now, see here, young man," he began, addressing Pritchard, "there's absolutely no need for this kind of aggressive behavior towards this lady." But Pritchard, his face contorted in a mask of fury, waved him away dismissively, shouting, "Mind your own business, old man. This doesn't concern you. I'm handling a disruptive passenger." Finally, with a dramatic, theatrical sigh of utter exasperation, as if he were the one being put upon, Pritchard roughly grabbed Evelyn's precious leather satchel from her unresisting, though now trembling, hand. "Fine," he spat, his voice thick with contempt. "If you can't manage to follow simple instructions, I'll deal with your precious scientific equipment myself." He then proceeded, with a shocking and deliberate carelessness, to try and violently shove the bag, which, while compact in its external dimensions, was rigidly structured internally due to its sensitive, irreplaceable contents, into a small, already partially occupied overhead space several rows away from Evelyn's seat, a space clearly too small and too precarious. He did this heedless of Evelyn's sharp, involuntary intake of breath and her quiet but firm, desperate plea, "Please be careful with that bag. That contains irreplaceable research materials and delicate prototypes." He ignored her completely, grunting with the effort of his rough handling, his actions a clear, unambiguous display of contempt, not just for her, but for the inherent value of her belongings, for her professional dignity, for her very personhood. The bag inevitably did not fit. With another muttered curse, he yanked it out with such force that one of the leather straps tore slightly, and then, with a final, contemptuous, almost violent gesture, he turned and unceremoniously tossed it onto an empty middle seat in Evelyn's assigned row, where it landed with a jarring, sickening thud. "There," he said, panting slightly from his unprofessional exertions, his face still flushed with anger. "Happy now, are we? Or are you going to continue delaying this entire flight and inconveniencing hundreds of other passengers with your ridiculously entitled attitude and your oversized junk?" Before Dr. Reed could formulate a response, or before the other increasingly agitated and disgusted passengers could voice their own growing protests, more forcefully, the aircraft's main boarding door hissed shut with an air of irrevocable finality. The captain's voice, calm, professional, and utterly oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded in the economy cabin, came over the intercom system, announcing the imminent departure for Geneva and requesting that all passengers please take their seats immediately and that all flight attendants prepare the cabin for takeoff. Gary Pritchard shot Evelyn one last venomous, triumphant glare, a look that clearly conveyed his belief that he had won, that he had successfully put her in her place. He then turned on his heel, smoothed down his already creased uniform jacket with an air of aggrieved self-importance, and strode briskly, almost jauntily, towards his station at the front of the cabin, the very picture of misused authority and unearned self-satisfaction. Evelyn, shaken to her core, but her resolve hardening into something akin to adamantium, carefully, almost reverently, retrieved her abused satchel from the middle seat. Her heart was pounding with a discordant mixture of cold, righteous fury and a dawning, steely, almost terrifying determination. She quickly, expertly checked its precious contents. Miraculously, the cryogenically sealed vials containing her prototype therapeutic agent seemed to be intact, though her high-security laptop had clearly shifted precariously within its padded compartment, and one corner of its casing now bore a small, fresh dent. She took her assigned window seat, her mind already racing, no longer with the intricate details of her upcoming scientific presentation, but with the precise legal, corporate, and public relations strategies she would meticulously employ to ensure that flight attendant Gary Pritchard, and indeed the entire corporate entity of Global Wings Airlines, would face the full, unmitigated, and very public consequences of this disgusting, unprofessional, and deeply, demonstrably racist incident. He had called her a problem. He was about to discover, to his and his employer's profound and lasting regret, just how significant, how multifaceted, and how extraordinarily expensive a problem Dr. Evelyn Reed, armed with truth, evidence, and an unshakable moral conviction, could truly be. The flight to Geneva would be long and uncomfortable, filled with the bitter aftertaste of humiliation, but her resolve, she knew, was even longer and far more enduring. The game, she thought with a grim, almost predatory satisfaction, was far from over. It had, in fact, only just begun. Upon landing in Geneva hours later than her original schedule had dictated, due to the initial flight delay compounded by the ugly and entirely unnecessary boarding incident, Dr. Evelyn Reed's first, most urgent call was not to her hotel to rest and recover from the ordeal, nor was it to the World Health Innovators Summit organizers to reconfirm her now tightened presentation slot. It was to a secure, heavily encrypted satellite line connecting her directly to the senior litigation partners of Stratton & Finch, the formidable, globally renowned international law firm that Novagene Therapeutics kept on a substantial and very wisely invested annual retainer for precisely such unforeseen, high-stakes contingencies. Her voice, though audibly weary from the long, stressful journey and the considerable emotional toll of the encounter, was a model of extraordinary clarity, dispassionate precision, and meticulous recall as she recounted, with the exacting detail of a seasoned scientific observer, every offensive aspect of flight attendant Gary Pritchard's unprovoked and sustained abusive conduct and Global Wings Airlines' abject systemic failure to provide a safe, respectful, and non-discriminatory environment for its fare-paying passengers. Immediately following the call, she securely emailed them the damning, crystal-clear audio recording from her smartphone, along with the names, seat numbers, and voluntarily offered contact information of several fellow passengers, a diverse group including the elderly gentleman who had tried to intervene, a young Swiss couple on their honeymoon, and an American businessman, who had witnessed the entire shameful episode and had, with undisguised outrage, offered her their support and their willingness to testify. Some, she noted, had also indicated they had captured their own video footage of the incident. The team of high-powered litigators at Stratton & Finch, a firm legendary for its aggressive take-no-prisoners approach to complex corporate litigation and its unwavering commitment to its high-profile clients, listened to Dr. Reed's account and then to the audio recording with a mixture of profound professional disbelief at the sheer stupidity of the airline employee and a dawning, almost predatory, legal excitement. They recognized immediately, with the practiced acumen of seasoned courtroom warriors, that this was not just a lamentable case of exceptionally poor customer service or an isolated incident of an employee having a bad day. This was a textbook, almost perfectly preserved, example of blatant racial and class-based discrimination, public humiliation, defamation, and potentially, given the critical, irreplaceable nature of Dr. Reed's research materials and the potential global health implications of her work, even a case for reckless endangerment of intellectual property and negligent interference with a scientific endeavor of profound international importance. They also recognized something else, something that Evelyn, in her initial fact-focused recounting of the incident, had modestly, characteristically downplayed: her own rapidly ascending, almost meteoric status and influence in the interconnected worlds of cutting-edge scientific research and high-stakes global finance. Nova Gene Therapeutics, they knew from their own due diligence files on their client, was on the very verge of publicly announcing a transformative strategic partnership with PharmaCorp Global, one of the largest, wealthiest, and most politically influential pharmaceutical conglomerates on the planet. This eagerly anticipated partnership, the culmination of years of secret, intense negotiations and contingent almost entirely on the successful, unmarred presentation of Dr. Reed's conclusive data at the Geneva Summit, was valued in the multiple billions of dollars. It was poised to revolutionize not just Novagene's future, but the entire therapeutic landscape for neurodegenerative diseases. Furthermore, as an integral part of this impending game-changing deal, Nova Gene Therapeutics was in the final delicate stages of negotiating an exclusive, multi-year, multi-million-dollar global corporate travel contract with none other than Global Wings Airlines. This contract was intended to facilitate the extensive, complex international travel required for their upcoming global clinical trials, regulatory approval processes, and eventual product launches across 6 continents. The irony was as staggering as the potential financial and reputational fallout for the unsuspecting airline. Gary Pritchard's casual bigotry had not just insulted a passenger, it had potentially torpedoed a colossal corporate partnership.